Welcome to Awesome Movie Year, the podcast where we take a look back at an awesome year for movies, which is every year. I'm Josh Bell, film critic and writer, and I'm joined by my co-host.
Jason Harris, filmmaker, comedian, and you birds gonna keep squawking? Or are we gonna do a podcast here? I have the rhythms down, but the voice itself is hard. I could get the modulations, but you know what? It's a work in progress. I'm trying, Josh. I'm trying.
No, that's okay. I am always impressed at the range of impressions that you can do. So they're not all going to be the best, and that's okay.
No, but you know what? The Bogart one, not that great, but give me a week. I'm going to rock that Sydney Greenstreet impression.
I believe
hard.
it.
Hard.
I believe that. Yes, yeah. Absolutely. So in this season of Awesome Movie Year, we are talking about the films of 1941. And we are here at our debut feature episode talking about the directorial debut of the great John Huston, which is The Maltese Falcon, starring, of course, Humphrey Bogart and Sydney Greenstreet, as well as Mary Astor and Peter Lorre. The third adaptation, actually, of Dashiell Hammett's 1930 novel featuring private detective Sam Spade on the trail of I guess not really mysterious. We learn a lot about it, but a coveted object that is a little statuette of a falcon that lots of people want, and various twists and turns, lots of hard-boiled dialogue. And this is sort of like proto-noir, I guess we could call it.
I think this is Noir 101, bro. If someone's like, let me see a great film noir, and you started them with this, I think you nailed it.
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe technically in terms of like the period of time that it is maybe a little early, but certainly it has all of those elements that we expect from film noir, including the femme fatale, Mary Astor's character, this sort of compromised protagonist, Sam Spade. You've got the shady underworld, you've got morally compromised characters, and you've got the great film noir look. I mean, John Huston is a very, very, very confident visual stylist here in his debut as a director. So yeah, I think we can say that.
I'm glad you
fair.
Put the look in there because, you know, the angles, the use of light and shadows, the way like faces will be half in the dark and half in the light. He just crushes the whole thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the shadows of like just the sign, the names of the detectives in the window on the outside of their office that are you constantly see reflected on the wall and on the characters, gives you this sense of like oppressiveness the whole time. So it is amazing, and it is especially amazing in comparison to the other versions, I think. So again, this is the third time that this novel was adapted. It had previously been made in 1931 with Ricardo Cortez as Sam Spade and Bibi Daniels as the femme fatale character that does not go by Bridget O'Shaughnessy. They never reveal her real name. They just keep her as Miss Wonderly in that version. And it's pretty straightforward and dull. It's interesting because it basically is the same. They both follow the plot of the novel pretty closely and include some of the same dialogue, but the style and the performances and all of that Huston and the cast bring to this version really makes it clear how much of a difference that makes.
I don't think you could do better than this. Like for this movie, this book, this script, like they crushed it all the way through. Spoiler alert, I liked the movie, Josh.
I liked it too. I did. And I watched that 1931 version just right before this, which is, again, it's not that good. It's not terrible, but it's probably only worthwhile as a curiosity. I've also seen the 1936 version, which is called Satan Met a Lady and is a loose adaptation that turns it almost into a comedy with Warren William as Sam Spade, although they rename all the characters, and Bette Davis as the femme fatale. And I love Bette Davis, which is the reason that I watched that movie. But even Bette Davis said it was not worth watching. So really no need to watch those. I watched them anyway. But this is the definitive version of this Dashiell Hammett story.
But that's what we love about you, Josh.
Thank you, Jason.
I use this week, lately I haven't been able to really do that kind of extra research or background work that I like. We watch the movie. I like to watch all these kind of satellite movies, whether it's from the director or the actor or something related to it, like a remake. So I this week watched another great Humphrey Bogart noir, In a Lonely Place, the Nicholas Ray movie. And I am in the middle of another John Huston movie, Night of the Iguana, and high recommendations for both of those. Like this is like when we did Sidney Lumet or Howard Hawks. Like, let's just go. Give me the list and let's rock.
Yeah, I love In a Lonely Place is great. I haven't seen Night of the Iguana, but I've seen, quite a few Humphrey Bogart films and John Huston films and films they made together. And I agree. Recommendation to for almost all of that stuff. And Bogart, this was Huston's debut as a director. He had worked previously as a writer on a lot of films. And this was also Bogart's really big breakout performance. He was already in his early 40s and he'd been kind of a character actor for a long time. There's a lot of movies from the 30s where Bogart shows up in small roles and he's generally always enjoyable to watch. But just a little earlier in 1941, Bogart had starred in a film that John Huston wrote called High Sierra. And the success of that movie was what enabled Huston to have the clout to say, now I'm going to direct as well. And he and Bogart had worked well together. And so they decided to work together again on this film. And High Sierra is decent. It's not fantastic, but you can see some of the beginnings of what would be a great collaboration. And that's just from a little earlier in the same year.
Yeah, it's funny that that's what it took to get John Huston a directorial job, because as you said, he was already such a successful screenwriter. We talked about him on Sergeant York last week. He comes from Hollywood royalty, right? His father, Walter Huston. So you would think this guy had already proven himself to the point like, yeah, take a run, bro. Take a run.
Yeah, I mean that Hollywood royalty element you'd think might make a bigger difference. But certainly the other thing in this period, it was much less common for someone to be both a writer and director, especially like on the same film. So even having success as a screenwriter didn't necessarily mean that you would get that chance to direct unless you were really pushing for it. So I'm sure it helped that he had, the Huston name, and Walter Huston, I think, has a slight brief cameo in this film.
He does.
So,
uncredited.
Right. And, just doing something nice for his son there.
Hey, Josh, I just want to circle back real fast to Night of the Iguana because, and you'll appreciate this, 1953, The Robe, you knew how I did not like. I said there are much better Richard Burton performances out there when he gets to actually showcase a different style. Night of the Iguana, huge, great performance from him.
Oh, good to know. I definitely would like to see that. That's one that I've not had a chance to watch. So I'm glad we can redeem Richard Burton and
someone had to.
Some element of 1953. Maybe someday, eventually, we'll watch another movie from that year that you will like. But we're here in 1941 still, and The Maltese Falcon was a big hit. It grossed $1.8 million on its budget of $375,000. It was nominated for 3 Oscars, including Best Picture, Best Supporting Actor for Sydney Greenstreet, and Best Adapted Screenplay. And it was highly acclaimed by critics as well. Bosley Crowther in the New York Times said, "The Maltese Falcon turns out to be the best mystery thriller of the year, and young Mr. Huston gives promise of becoming one of the smartest directors in the field. With The Maltese Falcon, the Warners and Mr. Huston give us again something of the old thrill we got from Alfred Hitchcock's brilliant melodramas or from The Thin Man before he died of hunger. This is not to imply, however, that Mr. Huston has imitated anyone. He has worked out his own style, which is brisk and supremely hard-boiled. As Mr. Huston has adapted it, the mystery is as thick as a wall, and the facts are completely obscure as the picture gets underway. But slowly the bits fall together, the complications draw out, and a monstrous but logical intrigue of international proportions is revealed."
Yeah, this is why it was such a pleasure, because Huston is one of the great directors in cinema history, right? And he doesn't stumble out of the gate. He comes out and announces himself. Oh, I was like, get ready, because you're about to have 30 years of just top level filmmaking. And then you put Bogart in there, right? When I was doing my research, I saw like an AFI poll in 1999 named him like the greatest movie star of all time. And this goes back to the same conversation that we had with Cary Grant. And to me, like a Paul Newman, whatever, these guys are just so good and so charismatic and so individual. Like you cannot stop watching them. Humphrey Bogart is so he just draws you in the best way. He's not eating scenery. But he owns every scene. He's so good.
Yeah, absolutely. He really is. And I think I would add John Wayne, who we talked about in Stagecoach in our 1939 season. And this isn't Humphrey Bogart's debut performance. As I said, he'd been a character actor for a long time at this point, but he certainly grabs your attention immediately. And you can see that he should have been a leading actor. I mean, this is not his only lead role, but he should have been a leading actor in prominent films before this. And you know, you can see why he is going forward.
He was a revered stage actor, Broadway, and you could see how that would be, a draw to, like he would command the stage.
Yeah, of course. So I was amused that Crowther mentions Hitchcock in 1941 as if Hitchcock is sort of old hat at this point. And of course, some decent Hitchcock movies still to come.
Well, I think that that just goes to show the amount of influence he had on cinema at that point in time already. I compare it to like a Scorsese thing. People, young filmmakers who are influenced by, say, a Tarantino might not realize that they're being influenced by Scorsese because his reach is so wide. I think that's what the same with Hitchcock.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So Variety, in their unbylined review, said, "This is one of the best examples of actionful and suspenseful melodramatic storytelling in cinematic form. Unfolding a most intriguing and entertaining murder mystery, Picture displays outstanding excellence in writing, direction, acting, and editing, combining an overall as a prize package of entertainment for widest audience appeal. John Huston, son of actor Walter Huston, makes his debut as a film director after several years as a film writer. His entrance into the directorial field is noteworthy, with display of keenest knowledge in tempo development and handling of the various players. An intriguing piece of melodramatic entertainment, Maltese Falcon weaves swiftly through a series of attention-holding episodes to crack through to a most unsuspecting climax."
So to me, we've already just talked about what a great director he is, but we can't under or overstate, I should say, how important it is that he's such a good writer, right? Because like you said, you've seen two other versions of this film and, do they work? Do they not work? But I think this is such a tightly put together package as a script. And it leads into the directing, the fact that he had everything, basically, I don't know if it was storyboarded, but he meticulously knew what every shot was going to be. They basically had shot this sequentially, which the actors were really happy with. And almost everything that they shot made it into the final cut, right? So, he was so prepared, and that really played out to the advantage of the film.
Yeah, and I mean, it's interesting. I agree with you that the writing is key, but it is interesting that, first of all, much of the writing comes from Hammett. There's a lot of just verbatim stuff from the novel. And like I said, if you watch that 31 version, the plot is the same. There are lines there that I assume also came from the novel that are the same, and it's not nearly as good. So the direction and the acting and the cinematography, all of that is what elevates it. But certainly this is a very tightly written script. And I think it's interesting to compare it to something like The Big Sleep, which I feel like is often paired with this because it's another hard-boiled Humphrey Bogart detective story where you can watch The Maltese Falcon and maybe it is confusing, but it all adds up at the end, right? You can follow it. You can see here's what happened. Here's what was really going on. And The Big Sleep is very entertaining, but even the makers of The Big Sleep did not know what was going on. And so, Huston and Hammett together have this very tightly plotted.
I think, this goes back to the idea, Josh, you and I last year didn't love Strange Darling. Dave did, right? But are you throwing twists in there just to throw twists in there? Or are you doing something to make sure there's a reason for it? And that's why I think what you're saying, if it gets confusing or throws you off the scent, you're still so into it because one, it does add up at the end, and two, it's so expertly crafted. You're like, oh, I didn't, what is going on now, right? Like, so yeah, this one just the sum is greater than the parts, right?
Yeah, and I don't want to discount The Big Sleep is a great movie, and one of the reasons it's great is because you would get to the end of it and think, "Wow, that was really good," and then if you would try to explain what happened, it would not be possible. And so, that is it's entertaining you along the way. But this too, I think, and I think if you get to the end of this movie and maybe you didn't follow all of it, it's still really entertaining, and it ultimately doesn't matter if you didn't get how it all added up, but it does.
I think it does. And there's that key scene, which I want to go back and rewatch. It's a 7-minute single take where Greenstreet is explaining the history of the Maltese Falcon to Bogart, which like masterworks by both the actors, but also the direction. And, the crew was just locked in as far as like, hey, we're going to one take this. And if someone messes up, we're doing the whole take again. So I think that is probably like, hey, I want to be a filmmaker. Cool. Watch this scene. Maybe try to reshoot it just to see how you do it and see how hard it is. And I think that's just a great example of filmmaking. You can't do better than that, really.
Yeah, and it's not drawing attention to itself. I feel like I often get frustrated with single take.
I know what you're saying.
Yeah.
Right. It's like show offy, but this is function, right? It's functional. Right. So it all elevates in its own regard because of that.
Yeah, and you could watch that scene and not think about how it was one take, and you'd still get whatever you need to get out of the scene. Whereas I feel like a lot of times you watch a scene like that, and at a certain point you're like, oh shit, they haven't cut yet. And you stop paying attention to what's actually happening.
And that's exactly what happened to me, because I agree with you on that too, right? I didn't even realize it till I did the research. And look, man, I watch a lot of movies. I'm pretty adept at knowing when something's in a single take, but this one had me so enraptured with the story and the performances. I was like, what? That was a single take? I have to go back and watch that scene again,
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's fantastic. So finally, the Film Daily, also unbylined review, said, "It is beautifully made, excellently cast and acted, while John Huston's direction of his own screenplay is as brilliant as any of the jewels which are alleged to encrust the figure of the Falcon, whose possession is the crux of the story. Slender clues branch into clear avenues for solution, but so ingeniously is the script fashioned that not until a whole series of hair-raising episodes and sharp twists of plot is Bogart in a position to draw the net around this dangerous quarry. The Maltese Falcon, while an imaginative yarn, is studded with realism."
It's heightened realism.
Yeah,
but
realism might be a stretch there.
Right. Although from what I read, the fat man, Sydney Greenstreet, was based on a real person who was like a political fixer who claimed to be a British spy and was looking for like these kind of lost treasures type things. So yeah, I mean, and Hammett, that's the thing. Hammett he worked at a detective agency. So all of this is based on experiences that he's had, if not exactly like, hey, I'm looking for a Maltese Falcon, but these type of characters and the type of cases they would have.
Yeah, and I mean, it is heightened, of course, as you say, and it's further heightened by the style and the way that the dialogue is. It's hard boiled, it's stylized. Do people really talk like this? No, of course not. But it does feel authentic. And I think that is something that comes back to what we're saying about how great Humphrey Bogart is that performance, you get the like weariness and the cynicism of Sam Spade. You get how sort of like tired of the world he is, and all of that is conveyed through Humphrey Bogart's performance. And the supporting characters, Sydney Greenstreet and Peter Lorre, we should mention too, they're both fantastic, but their characters are sort of, they're cartoons in a way, and they're very, very good. But I think it's grounded then by Sam Spade, who through the whole movie, you really, every time he comes across something else, he's like, oh, this fucking shit again, and you really get that impression from him.
Bogart is a master of playing a character that the world has beaten the shit out of, right?
Yes.
And he just keeps going. And, if I'm going to say like something like In a Lonely Place, where Act 3, I think, is almost tough to suspend all the disbelief, where he gets paranoid of what's going on. It only works because he is so good at playing it that way.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And here, this is less intense than that. But I think, again, not to keep harping on that old version that no one has seen, but you watch Ricardo Cortez in that one, who plays this kind of like slick, smarmy version of Sam Spade, and he doesn't feel like a real person at all. So this, so much credit to Bogart on this. I want to just, for my own amusement here, some little film history thing that I always find interesting. Elsewhere in their review, Variety mentions, to secure utmost in audience reaction, exhibs can take advantage of the surprise finish by publicizing starting times of the picture and advising patrons to get maximum entertainment by seeing it from the start. And I'm just always fascinated by the fact that for decades, people would just show up at the movie theater whenever, sit through a movie starting whenever, and then go back around and start from the beginning. And that was common to the point where Variety is like, hey, maybe let people know what time the movie starts so you can see it from the beginning.
That is funny. That is very odd. So
it's crazy.
We wouldn't think of it that way. But, in 100 years, they're going to look back and say, remember when they didn't release Bridget Jones in America in the theater and it made $350 million overseas, but it was on a little thing called Peacock out here. So,
are you saying that Peacock won't exist in 100 years?
I'm saying that movie release patterns and schedules still have their issues, Josh.
That is certainly true. So, yeah, I mean, and I think that when we talk about like certain traditions or certain standards for how people watch movies, it's interesting always to look back and realize this kind of thing that we would be appalled by the idea of now, people were just casually doing that. And in fact, I mean, speaking of Alfred Hitchcock, when Psycho came out, that was one of the biggest changes because Hitchcock was adamant, you have to see this from the beginning and you cannot let people in after it starts. And that was sort of a beginning of a shift in the way people would watch movies like that. So maybe someday we'll talk about that in more detail. But for now, the Maltese Falcon. Jason, anything you want to get into else about the background of this?
I have a quote from famed movie reviewer Scoop McGillicuddy. He says, "What in the whiz bang? I haven't seen a pick like this since 1939 Baby New Year's. It's a real gasser. Get off the giggle juice and get in there for the bee's knees."
Oh, I thought you were going to say something real, but that's okay.
Okay, I'll say something real.
I'm sure you prepared that one.
I didn't. I did not, Josh.
Wow, just improvising all the old-timey slang. Way to go.
Dashiell Hammett on Sam Spade, who, one of the most, shall we say, enduring detectives in film, right?
Yeah.
Didn't him and Marlowe, right? With who was Liam Neeson last year. Spade has no original, I think he meant like ideas or thoughts. He is a dream man in the sense that he is what most of the private detectives I worked with would like to have been, and in their cockier moments thought they approached.
Yeah, I mean, he does have that sort of, we talk about like his cynicism or his weariness, but he also has that sort of pure focus, that we see especially when his partner Miles Archer is killed. And even though he spends the whole movie trying to get to the truth of who killed Archer, he also, as soon as Archer is dead, casually says to his secretary, well, take his name off the sign and make it just say Sam Spade. And it's like, hey, that's just that level of detachment maybe is what those, as Hammett is saying, those real detectives would aspire to.
Yeah, he was also fucking his partner's wife. So maybe he was like, yeah. And every time they were like, I guess Miles had his good points too. He was like, I guess.
I feel like your bogey is improving there. So you had not, obviously, as you're saying, seen this, or had you seen Bogart at all in anything?
Of course, Casablanca. Okay. Yeah. But this was a pleasure, and the best compliment I could say is this made me want to watch more noir movies, more John Huston movies, and more Humphrey Bogart movies. And I'm pretty much doing all of those things right now. So while I've seen others, and of course, plenty of noirs and a good amount of Hustons, it's fun to keep doing this.
Yeah, those are all great things to keep watching. And I had seen this, but a very long time ago. and didn't remember a ton about it. And also, I think, again, had probably conflated parts of it with The Big Sleep, which I also saw a long time ago. So it was fun to revisit. And I feel like I perhaps did myself a disservice by watching that original one so closely with before this, because I was like, I knew every single beat of the story, right, as it was coming. And it was like, oh, okay, so they did this slightly differently or this. And yeah, so I wouldn't recommend it, but
But
I was
Josh,
glad to watch it again.
you've probably seen more film noirs than basically anyone I know. Maybe my dad, but you could write a book on film noir.
Well, there are lots of experts who have seen way more than I have and have written books on film noir, but I do thoroughly enjoy that. My dad and I, whenever I visit him, will watch Noir Alley with Eddie Muller on TCM, and that's always fun. But there's so much, like there's a ton more. Criterion has a program on the Criterion channel right now of noirs from Argentina that I'd love to get into.
Yeah,
That I've
that
never
sounds
seen.
cool.
So always more to watch.
It's an interesting genre because it's as hit or miss of a genre as there is, right? If it hits, it's a real cracking, top level film. And if it misses, it's really, really hard to be like, yeah, that was just okay, or I liked it, right? It's like, it's a love or just total disinterest to me on how kind of it plays out, I think.
Yeah, I don't know. For me, I just like all the sort of standard elements of it. And I feel like that way, like I'd rather watch a bad noir movie than a bad movie or even a mediocre movie in some other genres or subgenres. It's the same way I feel about horror, really. I'll watch a crappy horror movie and still kind of have fun with it. Whereas even a mid-level movie that's like, a mid-level like war movie or martial arts movie or something, to pick genres I'm much less interested in, I won't even bother with. So I don't feel that way about noir, actually.
Well, I should tell the audience, full disclosure, the three of us have worked on a film noir film together, Rick Thunder and Look Back Tomorrow, which Josh and I co-wrote, I directed, and Dave scored. It was played on the film festival circuit for almost a year and a half, won a good amount of awards. Well, maybe we'll post it somewhere when we release the episode, but that was a really fun project for us.
Yeah, I loved working on that, and it turned out really, really well. So, and it was always great to see people's response to that. So, Dave, had you seen this or other Bogart, noir, John Huston, any of that stuff?
I had not seen this. I also really liked it. We'll get into that later. I've seen Casablanca. I've probably seen at least a couple others, but that's the only one I remember watching recently.
I did implore Dave to watch Fat City this week.
I was planning on it, but I didn't get to it. But yeah, it's going to happen for sure.
So good.
It is.
Such a great movie. Yeah.
So I'm sure we'll get into all of that in a bit, but for now, we'll come back and talk more of our general thoughts on the Maltese Falcon. Welcome back to Awesome Movie Year. In this episode of our season on the films of 1941, we are talking about John Huston's directorial debut, The Maltese Falcon. And we keep saying about how the plot is convoluted, but you can follow it. I don't know if we should really go through the beats of this plot here. Everyone wants the Maltese Falcon, and everyone is lying about why they want it and who they are and what it is. And Sam Spade is caught in the middle. I feel like that's all you really need to know.
Yeah, I mean, when we get the explanation of the Maltese Falcon, however much truth is in there, is enough to get us to where we need to go with it. And then the reveal of the Falcon at the end and what it is and what it isn't is a perfect ending.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing that I thought related to that was maybe a misstep is that at the very beginning of the movie, there's like a title card that explains to you what the Maltese Falcon is. And I felt like you don't want to know that right away. I mean, that scene that you're talking about, the great unbroken take where Sydney Greenstreet is like explaining the history of it while Sam Spade is busy, like practically passing out because he's been drugged. That's all you need. And I think it's good to build up before that, if you haven't seen the movie, to like, what even is this thing? And Sam Spade doesn't know. And for a long time, he doesn't even know that that's what people are looking for. Bridget O'Shaughnessy, Mary Astor's character, comes to him and she gives him a fake name and she gives him this fake story about her missing sister who doesn't even exist. And so he and Miles Archer are set on this kind of wild goose chase, being used by her for her ends before they even know what this statue is. So I didn't see this anywhere, but to me, that title card smacked of something that the studio was like, you need to put this on here at the beginning so people aren't like, what is this Falcon thingy and when are we going to talk about it?
Yeah, I'm with you. We didn't need it. It's, the explanation is great, and kind of keeping the audience off balance works for me.
What if that title card is like a little treat for the people who just showed up to the theater at the beginning, first of their kind,
Yeah, it might be. It might really be. Or, it'll give you that information if you showed up in the middle and were confused about what this thing was. Then you'll be able to get it all right away.
Yeah.
I mean, again, weirdly, like I feel like I watched some old movie not that long ago, and I can't remember what it was, but it was a movie where the characters were at the movies and you see them in the theater and they're talking and the woman is like, oh, here's where we came in, let's go. And so it was like they'd gotten right back around to the point where they had started. So
Josh,
the way people did things then.
You should do a little research on when it became in vogue to start going to a movie when the movie started.
Yeah, like I said, I'm pretty sure it was with Psycho in 1960, and it was Hitchcock's like personal clout that kind of got that to change. So I'm sure there were other aspects, but I think that's a pretty famous, like, the marketing of Psycho as a whole is very famous, and that's a key element.
Hitchcock's next movie playing in IMAX for a full 3 months before he allows Netflix to release it.
Yeah, I feel like he was the one. That was that sort of situation of its day. And he was one of the only people who could insist on that, and the theaters would follow.
Well, he did a good job. So, Josh, you mentioned a misstep. I have two missteps in this movie. And one is the love affair. I know it's 1941, but between Bogart and Astor, she's really a villain in this movie, the way I look at it. And he falls for her right away, which he does in basically every movie except maybe Casablanca, right? Where it's more of a lost love type thing. But I didn't really buy into that, right? She's always lying to him. There's never anything where they're really out and getting to know each other. And then he's just like kissing her, like, you could do this differently. There's more out there for you. And it's like, she can go away. It's not that she's bad by any means in the film. I just didn't buy into that love story right there. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think on the one hand, you have to accept, like you said, it's 1941 and all kinds of love stories in films of this period, the characters will fall in love very, very quickly.
Right, in like 2 minutes.
Because they can't have sex. And so saying I love you is a stand-in for having sex, because that they can do in during the code period. So on the one hand, yeah, there's that convention and you just kind of have to accept it. But on the other hand, I think you're right. And weirdly, even though this is a code era, and it's more explicit in the 31 version, which is pre-code, but still, I was watching this and I was thinking, oh, are we going to even get Sam Spade's affair with Miles Archer's wife in this version? Because I don't know if that's allowed for the hero to be having an extramarital affair, but we do. And so I think everyone who watched this movie would understand that what is going on in an extramarital affair, he's clearly having sex with Miles's wife. And yet he treats her so dismissively the whole time. He's just like trying to avoid her and get his secretary to deal with her and all this stuff. And so I think at first when he kisses Mary Astor, you maybe think, oh, he's just a womanizer, right? She's hot and she's there. And so he wants to hook up with her. But I think you're right that it goes on and you're meant to buy into the idea that they really are in love and they care about each other. That is tough because they're also completely manipulating each other on both sides. I mean, he's doing whatever it takes to sort of save himself from being arrested for these crimes that, to be fair, he did not commit, and is happily willing to throw other people under the bus, including eventually her. So how sentimental is he really?
I mean, she deserved to be thrown under the bus. She was lying constantly. I mean, did she ever really care about him? She was trying to save her ass at the end. I love you and you love me, like that type of stuff. I made her Katharine Hepburn for some reason, but yeah, I would have thrown her under the bus too. Like, all you've been is trouble. You got my partner murdered, all this stuff. You've gotten me into this. I've almost been arrested a few times. Great stuff between Bogart and like those kind of grizzled cops as well. There's always, in all the movies, there's like a good cop that he's a friend with, and then a bad cop is like, I'll go by the book. but when I get you, I'm going to get you but good, that type of thing. So really like that. And I like this relationship with the cops. It's like, oh, now that I know you're coming after me, I feel better about it. I'm all for it. Just let's have a drink together first, that type of thing.
Yeah. And the cops, they give him actually a lot of leeway when he's like, no, I'm going to go solve this murder. You just don't arrest me yet. And they're like, okay, we'll see how this goes. But yeah, I mean, and I feel like we should say, I mean, we keep saying he's throwing her under the bus, but she 100% did murder Miles herself. So it's not like he's framing her for something.
I mean, she's throwing everyone under the bus. She is basically the reason. That was my other misstep in this film, that the captain of the boat who brings them the Falcon, she basically gets him murdered. And that was my whole thing. Like, he gets either stabbed or shot on the boat, but he's somehow able to walk his way over to the office and be like, or to Sam Spade's apartment, I don't remember, and be like, here's the Falcon. Now I can die because I've walked from the pier to your apartment holding this thing with bullet holes all over me.
He was very determined. That's Walter Huston as the captain who gets killed. But yeah, I mean, that character isn't even really a character. I mean, later on they mention, oh, she met him in the Orient and they made this plan together where he would take the Falcon on his boat instead of her partner. But I mean, there's that also her partner, Floyd Thursby, who gets murdered, we never see. There's key sort of players in this story that only exist off screen. And I think one of the fascinating things about this movie is not only that, but there's multiple, like, very action-oriented things that happen that we never see, and we just hear about them later. We just hear some character saying, oh yeah, on our way here, this happened and that happened. And Sam Spade's like, oh, okay. And yet it's still fascinating. You're not frustrated. I mean, if you're frustrated, you're frustrated in the same way that Sam Spade is frustrated, which I think is the purpose of the movie, is that he's like, what the hell? What were you doing while I was waiting for you? Why did you do that? So, yeah, but I mean, I'm with you. And to me, as much as I was saying, and we keep talking about that long take scene and Sydney Greenstreet is great in explaining that, at a certain point, there's so much exposition. And again, maybe this is my fault for having watched the previous version right beforehand and knowing what the exposition was. But I was like, okay, this is enough of this.
Yeah, it didn't bother me.
It dragged me down a bit. But I mean, if you're going to present that, Huston does it in a really stylish way, and you've got the great performances. And it's impressive when an actor can deliver just like a long speech explaining the backstory of something and still be watchable. That's impressive.
Sydney Greenstreet eats. Yeah. He eats hard. He eats it all. You want to talk about maybe he's chewing. By the way, this was his screen debut.
Yes.
Like his age 61 or whatever it was. You're talking about the lead up and not giving stuff away. They keep referencing the fat man, and then he comes in, and it's perfect because you've already built up this character by just talking about him. And then he comes in and he just hammers it home even harder. And it's a big performance, but the character is big. And, Dave and I, sometimes I'm piecing it together, talk about, and Josh, you and I have talked about this, how like if you're watching a movie with The Rock in it, it's like, okay, The Rock, we get it. You need all the space in the scene and all the focus has to be on you, but it doesn't do anything to elevate the movie. Whereas this guy is giving a big performance that is so good and brings so much to the movie. You just want to keep watching him talk the whole time. And every time that Bogart tries to throw a jab at him or, and so, ooh, you are quite a character, sir. You are quite a character, right? Like, he's so great in this movie.
Yeah, I mean, we should say, too, this is his screen debut, but he was a hugely successful stage actor. Yeah, it's not like he was a nobody. But yeah, I mean, and I think another thing about that is a lot of times a movie will do what you were saying, where the characters are keep referencing, oh, this guy, what does this guy think? What's going on with that guy? And then you finally get that guy and you're like, really?
Who cares?
That's the guy?
Yeah, exactly.
And that's not what we have at all here. He shows up and you're like, oh yeah, this is definitely somebody that everybody would be focused on and scared of, or trying to impress, or trying to work with, or whatever. So yeah, he's great. And Peter Lorre, I know, Dave, you were a big fan of Peter Lorre's performance in this, is so amusing. And he's the opposite, right?
Yeah,
the fat
he's
man
meek,
is this looming.
small.
Yeah. Yeah, he's this looming presence, and Peter Lorre is just like, oh, okay,
Yeah.
all right.
Yes. She hit me again, so I had to run and hide. Yes. Oh, they're all abusing me.
He's such a little weirdo, and he's so great. Every
He's
scene
awesome.
with him, he's the best. And he like, you guys haven't really talked about how funny this movie can be when it wants to be, and like a lot of that comes from him.
Agreed. And also Bogart, dude, with that sarcasm, just those throwaway lines where he's so flippant, which is a trademark of his. He just crushes those.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the funniest, I think, the scene where we first meet Joel Cairo, where he tries very poorly to hold up Sam Spade in his office, and Sam Spade immediately like disarms him and then gets all this information out of him, and they make a plan. And then he's like, can I have my gun back? And Sam Spade is like, sure, here's your gun, harmless little guy. And then immediately he's like, oh, your hand's up now.
Yeah.
And you can see Bogart just be like, I got to hand it to you. You did it. All right, we can do that.
Yeah, he's a cool customer, that Sam Spade. Always, he never, as opposed to in A Lonely Place, where he's a screenwriter, not a detective, right? He never loses his cool in this movie.
Right. And I think that is the kind of character that could be like annoying. The Rock plays a character who doesn't ever lose his cool, and you're like, come on, The Rock, you're not a person. But Sam Spade is he's so rumpled. And the reason he never loses his cool seems like because he's already resigned to everything being terrible all the time. So why get worked up over it?
Well, this becomes the archetype of the grizzled noir detective, right? And usually in an archetype, you're talking about someone who's more of a caricature as opposed to a character. But that goes back to Bogart's talent and expertise as an actor, where you're like, you believe everything you're drawn in. Like, he's so good. Like, I know we're repeating ourselves, but this is just such a high level of execution all the way through that I really loved it. And I love the ending too, which we should talk about. Spoilers if you haven't watched it from 1941. We're going to spoil this 84-year-old movie for you, but you should watch this anyway. So watch this movie. So the whole movie is about getting this Falcon, which is from the Knights of the Templar in the 1500s. And it was a gold, a gold Falcon or something that was given to the king as a gift because he gave the knights an island. And he's like, just give me a Falcon every year. And like, instead of giving you a real Falcon, we're going to make you this gold Falcon. There's only a few in circulation. It's worth so much money. So all these murders, all these mishaps, all this travel around the world. Sydney Greenstreet's character says he's been chasing it for 18 or 19 years, right? Captain gets murdered as he delivers it. So we finally do the reveal of the Falcon, and it's a fake. And, is there a letdown? Not at all, because Sydney Greenstreet says, well, 19 years. I guess I can chase it for one more. Won't you join me, boy? Or something like that. And they're just like back on the adventure. And you could see why the studio would want a sequel right away after that. And it's probably really smart that they never did it.
Yeah, I mean, and Hammett didn't write. There's no sequel to the book, so that's a red flag right there for any kind of sequel that might come up. But yeah, I do love how. I mean, obviously, Sam Spade is very relaxed about the fact that this turns out to be a fake because that's how Sam Spade is. But I love that attitude that Sydney Greenstreet has because he's obsessed with this thing. And you think he'd be like, no, all of this for nothing. And he's just like, back on the horse, let's go. And, he's been at odds with Joel Cairo. And that's another great thing about Laurie's performance, where he's like, hey, do you want to come with me? And this guy who's been like beaten up and insulted and belittled, he just is so eager. He's like, really? Really? You want to take me with you? Okay, let's go.
Yeah. So they did have something in development, the further adventures of the Maltese Falcon. And just from that title alone, you could tell it wasn't going to be good.
Yeah, because the Maltese Falcon is not having adventures. That's not who we want to see having the adventures here. It's the human characters, I think, that are important. So, I mean, do we want to say anything else about like the visual style? I mentioned the shadows of the names on the windows that you constantly see is just such an iconic, striking look. And there's one scene where we didn't mention Wilmer, the fat man's kind of henchmen.
Heavy.
Yeah, who they attempt to pin the murder. Again, they're like, we're going to pin the murders on him. The murders he really did, we're going to pin them on him. But he's doing it just sort of at the behest of his boss. And when there's a great moment when he realizes that all these people have agreed to have him be the fall guy, and you just see each of their faces like looming above him, like one, shot of each of them. And I just thought was perfectly like, this guy who we don't really care about, suddenly you're like, oh, we're in his perspective and we see how scared he must be in this moment.
Yeah, we're talking angles, we're talking shadows, we're talking angles of shadows, right? How certain parts of the face are illuminated and certain parts are cut off. And, it, like we said, it was a meticulous preparation that really, really worked out here. One other thing, Josh, that I really love about this movie is the fact that Humphrey Bogart keeps referring to the Maltese Falcon as a dingus.
He does.
We'll get that dingus soon, you see.
Because he doesn't, again, this goes to what we're saying about the ending. Like, he doesn't care about this dingus at all. And these other people care about it so much. So I did want to mention, this is one of the sort of aspects of this being a code movie, that the relationship, I know, Jason, you're always amused by my claim of homoerotic.
Oh, undertones. Sydney Greenstreet was fucking everyone in his employ. Is that where we're going with this?
Yes, yeah. And apparently in the book, it's explicitly laid out that young Wilmer is his lover, and in the 31 version, it's very heavily implied. And here, they really downplay it, but it's clearly an element.
Well, I think that's also what you're talking about with, the studio, obviously the code, Hayes Code was like, hey, no sex, no drinking. And Huston was like, well, I can give you the no sex, but this character is a hard drinker and a hard smoker. We can't not have that. And they were able to work that out. But yeah, I think, the Greenstreet character is a hedonist, right? So, and he really pulls it off. Dave, little Max Bialystock in there. He would have been a great Max Bialystock in The Producers, I think.
Oh God, yeah, he fits that exactly. Really, I mean, but that's the thing with a lot of Mel Brooks. Like, everyone in this would fit really well in a Mel Brooks movie.
Yeah, that's I hadn't thought of it that way, but yeah, I'll grant you that. Yeah.
Do we want to rate this out of 5 Maltese Falcons, Josh?
I feel like that's what it has to be.
Well, see, you're getting 4 Maltese Falcons for me. That means there's one left out there, and I'll keep searching for it.
I gave this 3.5 this time because, like I said, I feel like I was slightly underwhelmed with the expository elements, but I feel like I should bump it up to 4 because that was mainly my fault of watching 2 versions back to back. So I'm going to give it 4 Maltese Falcons, which I think is what I gave it the first time I watched it. So
good man, Josh.
Thank you. Dave, how would you rate this?
I just wanted to briefly mention a moment that just made me laugh so hard when the detective is like, get their names and addresses. And immediately Joel Cairo's like, my name is Joel Cairo, Hotel Belvedere, just immediately divulging that information. But
he's a terrible criminal.
Yeah, he's really so good. 4 from me as well. Yeah, great movie.
All right. Good stuff. So
real fast before we do that, you think Dave loves our friend right there, Mr. Peter Lorre, so much because they share similar haircuts?
Oh, yeah. That's. I feel like not always, but Peter Lorre does have that kind of wavy hair,
curls.
in this film, those curls. Yeah, it's been a long time since you've compared Dave's hair to a movie character.
I mean, this one matches. So
yeah, I'm glad we got that in there. So we'll come back and talk about the legacy of the Maltese Falcon. Welcome back to Awesome Movie Year. In this episode of our season on the films of 1941, we are talking about John Huston's directorial debut, The Maltese Falcon. And as Jason was saying, there was never a real direct sequel to this film, but there were a lot of sort of quasi-sequels that came out over the years, starting in 1946 with a radio show called The Adventures of Sam Spade that aired for 5 years from 1946 to 1951. So already, even if, the main players from this were not all coming back for a big movie project, clearly the sort of IP here was being exploited within a few years.
And I think it is you called it proto noir. It's the prototype for every film noir movie that came afterwards. In a way, not everyone's like this, but this is a quintessential noir blueprint for me.
Yeah, no, it absolutely is. And you can see, I mean, this is one of those movies, Dave, I think you were mentioning this in your Letterboxd review, that is so influential that sometimes you watch movies like that for the first time, having seen everything that it influenced, and it seems less fresh. I don't really feel that way about this movie, but it certainly is the kind of thing that happens.
Yeah, you always see these kinds of movies and these kinds of characters like Sam Spade in things that have come since. But yeah, like you said, it didn't really affect this one just because it's so damn good.
Yeah, I mean, and Sam Spade is like, there are so many Sam Spade types that we see in various knockoffs or parodies or just things that have been influenced by this over decades. So there was a sequel of sorts in 1975 called The Black Bird, which was done as a comedy starring George Segal as Sam Spade Jr. and featuring two actors from this film, Lee Patrick, who plays Effie, the secretary, Sam Spade's secretary, and Elisha Cook Jr., who plays that character Wilmer, the henchman of the fat man. And I did not watch this. It does not seem to be widely available. It is very poorly regarded. And one thing that I noted that was in 1975, they make a running joke of the fact that his name is Spade. And you can imagine what sort of racist joke occurs multiple times in that film.
I thought it was like, ha ha, you're the name of a gardening tool.
No, that would have probably been better. So
that's a bummer. George Segal, amazing, great comedy actor. So that's a bummer that happened. But again, this didn't need a sequel. This is a perfect kind of piece of art on its own. Leave it be.
Yeah, but they don't. There were radio adaptations of this story in 1984, starring Tom Wilkinson as Sam Spade.
That's cool.
And in 2009, starring Michael Madsen as Sam Spade. Less certain about
grizzled, but and Bogart himself did like a radio play of this as well.
Yeah, and I think as we talked about probably a lot in our 39 season, it was very common during this period for any like Hollywood movie to immediately have a radio adaptation, often with the original actors. There was a 2009 prequel novel that was officially licensed by the Dashiell Hammett estate, even though he never wrote any other works after this with Sam Spade. And just recently in 2024, the TV series Monsieur Spade, starring Clive Owen as Sam Spade, set in 1963 in France, where Sam Spade has resettled and he takes on a new mystery there and has a long lost child with Bridget O'Shaughnessy, who shows up. And
I'm excited. I'm going to watch that.
Yeah, it's not bad. It gets so convoluted, and it's a 6-episode series, so you have to have a lot more twists and turns than just a feature film. And by the end, unlike the Maltese Falcon, by the end of that, I was just like, what is happening? Who are these people? But Clive Owen is very good, and he doesn't just do a Bogart impression. He's clearly Sam Spade, but he also is doing his own performance. So it's worth watching.
The novel of the Maltese Falcon was serialized in 5 parts in Black Mask, which I believe is a magazine from 1929 and 1930.
Yeah, and of course, if this was ever remade, it would definitely be a multi-part series on a streaming service.
That would probably be a better move. I think I would rather have that than watching this just remade as a movie. But I'll tell you who did watch this as a movie a lot. Ingrid Bergman watched it repeatedly to prepare for Casablanca, so she learned how to interact with Bogart that way.
Yeah, and I mean, I agree that like we don't need to remake this as a movie, but we really don't need to remake it as a TV series either. I think we just don't. Like Monsieur Spade had its issues, but that was at least do something new. Expand on this character in this story rather than just redoing it.
Josh, I read this. George Raft turned down this film for 2 reasons. He was originally supposed to be Sam Spade. One, he wouldn't work with a new director, not just a new director, but, again, Hollywood royalty who's already proven himself. Or 2, tell me if this sounds like something anyone would do in today's world. George Raft refused to do remakes.
I wish more people would do that in today's world.
I wish more studios would do that.
Exactly. I mean, and like remaking this in this era, in fact, Bosley Crowther in his review mentions how it's a remake and says he hasn't seen the original because, of course, if he didn't see it when it was first out in theaters, there was no way for him to watch it. So at least in this era, like if you did a remake, it might be because the original was not in circulation and no one was watching it. Whereas now it's always available. You can, if you were remaking this movie that's 80 plus years old, people can easily just watch the original.
That's what we did. We watched this one.
We sure did.
Should we talk about John Huston, who we alluded to on our last episode because he was one of the writers on Sergeant York, but one of the most iconic film directors in the history of cinema. He's got 2 Academy Awards, 3 Golden Globes. He had acting nominations for Best Supporting Actor for The Cardinal and Chinatown, also acted in Casino Royale, Myra Breckinridge, Battle for the Planet of the Apes, and he played Gandalf in the 1977 version of The Hobbit. He also directed a few fine pictures. Josh, what do you think?
Yeah, he's mainly known for that. I mean, he didn't start acting, I think, until the 60s when other directors kind of asked him to do little parts, and he's always entertaining. He's one of these directors as an actor, I think, who just shows up for his like big presence and isn't necessarily concerned with giving a layered performance, but he's entertaining to watch. So, but yeah, of course, as a director, I mean, we mentioned Fat City, which is a late period film from the 70s. I mean, he had an incredibly long career. This was his debut. His final film was in 1987 as a director, The Dead. And Fat City is a later film. And I remember one thing about watching Fat City for the first time. It's from 1972.
Yeah.
And it feels so much like a 1970s New Hollywood movie. And it's amazing that this guy who had been directing for 30 years made that film.
That's exactly, you nailed it. That's exactly it, right? It's an hour and a half. It's Stacy Keach and Jeff Bridges as these like 2 rundown boxers in Stockton. And it's New Hollywood done expertly. And I think it was like one of those things like where like, I know he was still working all the time, but like when an artist who you might have just put as like a nostalgia or a legend, like is like, hey, I still got some stuff left in me. And it wasn't like that was the end of it. I mean, Prizzy's Honor, right? That's 85. He did Annie in 82, which whatever. Awful. Yeah, but whatever. But, The Man Who Would Be King. We already mentioned Night of the Iguana. So, you can keep going. But one really amazing fact is he directed both his father, Walter, and his daughter, Angelica, to supporting actor/actress wins. How cool is that?
Yeah, I mean, there's that. It's probably the longest Hollywood dynasty. I was thinking about this. The Hustons, from Walter to John Huston, and then his children, Angelica and Danny, and his grandson Jack Huston, and we'll see if we're going to get another generation of that. But just amazing, lineage there.
He has his 2 Oscars came for writing and directing The Treasure of the Sierra Madre,
which is a great movie and another great Humphrey Bogart performance. I love Key Largo, also with Humphrey Bogart. In This Our Life, which is another early one with Bette Davis and Olivia de Havilland. All of those fantastic films. And he's entertaining to watch as an actor too. So Bogart.
I just wanted to say one thing, Josh, before we move on to Bogart. I remember I took a college class and it was Sean Clark at UNLV, and he kept bringing up this quote from John Huston. I think it was Huston who said this. He goes, they asked him how you make a good movie, and he goes, here's what I do. I find the best director of photography and I hire him. I find the best lighting director, gaffer, I hire him. Find the best actors, I hire them. I find the best sound person, art person, set designer. I hire all these people. Then I get the fuck out of the way.
Yeah, I mean,
Nice.
that makes absolute sense. I mean, I feel like that's, when you're the guy at the top, you want the best people working for you that you can trust to do exactly what their expertise is. And that's a smart thing to do, certainly. And you can see that here, right? I mean, and as a debut director, I'm sure you want the best people in all those positions so they can do what they do best, even if you yourself may not know exactly how to do all of those things at that point in your career. So that certainly comes across here. Bogart worked with John Huston numerous times. Treasure of the Sierra Madre, Key Largo, The African Queen, which Bogart won an Oscar for. And I mean, such an amazing career. We've mentioned most of these highlights here already: High Sierra, Casablanca, The Big Sleep, To Have and Have Not. But he's always just like fascinating to watch. And even if you go back to those early small roles, like I said, in some 1930s films, when he shows up for a brief moment, it's like, oh, hey, Humphrey Bogart, amazing.
Yeah. I was thinking how he would be canceled today, Josh, because when he and Lauren Bacall were on the set together, they met and they fell in love. He was 40, she was 19. They got married. They had a happy marriage, but of course he would be canceled today for such a thing.
She wasn't underage. There was no suggestion of inappropriateness.
Right, of course. That's what I'm saying.
I don't know
Just
that
let
he
him
would.
be.
People might be like, but I don't know that he would be canceled per se.
Yeah.
For that.
Well, there would be a lot of backlash against him.
Maybe so. But I feel like people are having affairs like that all the time still.
Great quote from Bacall on Bogart. There was something that made him able to be a man of his own, and it showed through his work. There was also a purity, which is amazing considering the parts he played. Something solid, too. I think as time goes by, we all believe less and less. Here was someone who believed in something.
Yeah, he really does inhabit, even though he's always himself. And I think we talked about this with like Jimmy Stewart and Cary Grant, where they become such big presences that every time you watch, you're just like, oh, it's Jimmy Stewart, it's Cary Grant. And Bogart has that too, but he really does disappear into these characters.
I think all three that you mentioned, I agree with, but they all serve their movies, right? As opposed to their movies serving them.
Yeah, that is certainly true. And that's the case even, as he becomes a bigger and bigger star. Mary Astor won an Oscar in 1941.
What a year for her. Yeah. Supporting actress, best supporting actress for The Great Lie. I've never seen that. Have you?
I have. And actually we may be talking about that later in the season.
Ooh.
We'll see depending on how something goes. But that's her and Bette Davis in that film. And she was very prolific starting in the 1920s all the way into 1964 when she retired, and then had a very long retirement that she was able to enjoy. And I feel like this is probably, despite the fact that she did win an Oscar for that other film, this is probably her best known role. She was always a kind of second tier actress, but is good in this and is always enjoyable. Maybe in a way where she's overshadowed by Humphrey Bogart. She's overshadowed maybe by Bette Davis in that film. I just recently rewatched Meet Me in St. Louis with Judy Garland, who of course is Judy Garland. And so how is she not going to be overshadowed? But she's a solid performer who always shows up and does what she needs to do.
A best-selling author as well. Great quote from awesome movie year alumnus Lindsay Anderson on Mary Astor, that when two or three who love cinema are gathered together, the name Mary Astor always comes up, and everybody agrees that she was an actress of special attraction whose qualities of depth and reality always seemed to illuminate the part she played.
I feel like that's not the case now, in that she's not someone whose name, especially from this period, whose name comes up more often than, Bette Davis or Greta Garbo or Ingrid Bergman, or, we could probably name 15 actresses from classic Hollywood whose names would come up before Mary Astor at this point. But that doesn't mean she isn't good.
Yeah, she was very good. Gladys George, who played Eva, which was Miles' wife. She was nominated for Academy Award for Best Actress for Valiant is the Word for Carrie in 1936. She was in Marie Antoinette, not the Sofia Coppola version, The Best Years of Our Lives, The Roaring Twenties. So she had a nice career there. The Flamingo Road, good stuff.
Yeah. Peter Lorre, as we're saying,
legend.
And has become, the thing I think about Peter Lorre is that he is still somehow this like pop cultural like archetype. And I guarantee that as a kid, I knew Peter Lorre parodies from like Looney Tunes and stuff far before I ever saw any movie with him, or the fact that, he was the basis for like Ren from Ren and Stimpy, the way that he speaks.
Yeah, there you go. That's what it was.
And all this stuff, even, up to like the Super Mario Brothers movie, I think, so it's funny. I mean, and he's a great actor. Like, obviously, going back and watching his actual roles, it's impressive to see him. I mean, he is sometimes slightly cartoonish in his later roles, the stuff he did with Roger Corman, but I mean, he's really good here. He's great in Casablanca. I recently watched speaking of film noir, a movie called The Face Behind the Mask from 1941, where he plays the lead role, and he has all this pathos to him, and it's a very nuanced performance full of depth and isn't just the Peter Lorre caricature, but he certainly has that element as well.
I thought even in this one, right, it's a kind of a fun supporting performance, but he brings real elements and real shades and layers to it. So the depth is there. You could watch M, you could watch The Man Who Knew Too Much, Arsenic and Old Lace. But one thing I think about is, you know, he was Jewish and he fled Germany. And I always think, like, when we get to someone like that, like, how much talent have we lost or didn't get to see because of fuck faces and racism and shit like that?
Yeah, I mean, he was able, for whatever reason, to get out, and not certainly everyone was. And, you know, right. Who did we lose? But I mean, there's so many people from that period actors, filmmakers who fled Europe and came to Hollywood and enriched Hollywood in so many ways because of that. And Lorre is one of those. So, Dave, I know you really liked him in this. Or do you have any favorite Peter Lorre performances or pastiches in pop culture?
No, I was just thinking about Ren, because especially I think this might have been the basis, because he says, "You idiot" at one point, or it might have been "you imbecile," but he does it in the exact cadence. Like, so, yeah.
Yeah, it's hilarious to see now. And I feel like, especially seeing it now, I watched some terrible animated movie for an article like a year or two ago that was from, you know, just recent. And they had a whole character who was doing Peter Lorre, and it was like, what child is like thinking, oh, it's a Peter Lorre bit in 2023 or whenever it was from, but they still do it and it's still fun and you can still enjoy it because there's something about the way he speaks and the way he acts that's just so entertaining.
It just really is.
I already told you how entertained I was by Sydney Greenstreet, and I just want to watch more and more of him. He and Bogart and Lorre did so many movies together: Casablanca, Passage to Marseille. So just good stuff all the way through. I can't wait to watch more of him.
Yeah, and he had this weirdly compressed film career where, as we were saying, he was 61 by the time he debuted in this film, was hugely acclaimed, Oscar nomination, all of that, and then was in a ton of movies just in the 40s, from 41 to 49, and then that film career kind of ended for him, and he transitioned into radio. He played the Nero Wolfe, the detective, on a long-running radio show in the 50s and was still working on stage, but it was just this brief burst of like film stardom in movies like this, and Casablanca, Christmas in Connecticut, which is a fun comedy that I've seen him in. And it was almost like a little side gig for him that he got to have fun with.
I just loved him. So
yes.
Josh, Elisha Cook Jr., who played Wilmer, was in more noirs than any other actor or actress. 21 noirs, including The Big Sleep, as you've mentioned. He was in other films, including Shane, The Killing, House on Haunted Hill, and Rosemary's Baby.
Yeah, long character actor career for that guy. So anything else you want to mention on the legacy of this film, Jason?
You idiot.
All right. I feel like we can take all of your impressions from this episode and add them together, and maybe we get to the level of some of your past ones. Yeah, something like that. But I appreciate the efforts as always. So that is the Maltese Falcon, and that is this episode of Awesome Movie Year. You can check us out online and on social media.
AwesomeMovieYear.com, Awesome Movie Year on Facebook and Instagram. No more Awesome Movie Pod. Wah, wah, wah. I'm at Jason Harris Comedy or Jay Harris Comedy and all the things. Go for Jason on Letterboxd. By the time this episode comes out, my residency at Jimmy Kimmel's Comedy Club will be more accessible to everyone because we are now going weekly at 6 p.m. on Sundays.
Check out Jason at Jimmy Kimmel's, and maybe he'll do a Peter Lorre impression.
I like doing impressions, Josh.
Yeah. You can find some old things from me at joshbellhateseverything.com. I am at Josh Bell Hates Everything on Facebook, at Signal Bleed on Blue Sky and on Letterboxd. And if you're on Letterboxd and you watch this movie or any of the movies we talk about on the show, tag your review Awesome Movie Year. We would love to know what you think. And check out our producer, David Rosen's awesome podcast, Piecing It Together.
Check out Piecing It Together wherever you listen to podcasts. Follow us on social media at Piecing Pod and join our Facebook group, Popcorn and Puzzle Pieces.
Jason, what's in our next episode?
Josh, if you don't think we dig deep enough into film history, get ready, because we are going to the Venice Film Festival winner of 1941. It's called the Iron Crown. This was the winner of the Mussolini Cup, which Josh has been trying to win for years.
Yeah, this will be an interesting exploration. So tune in next time for the Iron Crown, and thanks for listening to Awesome Movie Year.
Thank you for listening to Awesome Movie Year. Make sure to follow Awesome Movie Year on Facebook, at Awesome Movie Pod on Twitter, and at Awesome Movie Year on Instagram. And if you like the show, review us and rate us with 5 stars on Apple Podcasts.
An All Points West production, produced by David Rosen in Las Vegas.